In the last episode, I shared the story of how we found ourselves on an adventure into the jungles in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. But I've yet to tell the rest of that story, meaning where we're going from here. For the last 3 years, my definite chief aim, the phrase that you repeat to yourself before sleeping and upon awakening as described by Napoleon Hill, has included some variation of build sanctuary in paradise as part of my main goals in life. But what is sanctuary? Is it a place to hide? A safe space? No, sanctuary is a place to thrive. Safe enough, but more importantly, it has access to the resources that you need to achieve your purpose. Sanctuary is how you have the solace to find and fulfill that purpose. And of course, being called to this place, this paradise, that was our reward, our benefit in this spiritual exchange. But our end of the bargain had yet to be revealed to us. This tends to be the way that it goes when you bring Spirit a petition with no offer in exchange. Sometimes that means you're writing a blank check to the Spirit that you're calling upon. We knew that we wanted a home, homestead, a permaculture food forest. That was all part of the mission that I discussed in the last episode, Fern Gully Magic, to increase biodiversity, particularly on our lot in the vibrant high jungle of the Riviera Maya. What we've come to understand since is that this place that we found ourselves in is something of a blossoming spiritual community, like Tulum, but more genuine, more authentic. It's also something of an eco-friendly zone, with hard limits placed on construction and development in the area, particularly in the specific area around our property. Given our plans, this location is turning out to be an ideal fit. Moving into our tiny community in the jungle is a collection of upwardly mobile Americans, Canadians, and Central Mexicans who are mostly either retiring or, like us, disappearing into the jungle for social or political reasons. Everyone is here for the peace and tranquility, though not everyone has managed to acquire quite as much land as we have. This is creating a growing community of people who are intentionally distancing themselves from society and civilization. They tend to value nature, they want to grow their own food, and many of them are actively searching for their own spiritual identity. And the larger community within the Riviera Maya includes hundreds, if not thousands, of spiritual seekers and escapees and other disenfranchised types looking for an alternative to the mainstream. About an hour away, the coastal faux spiritual mecca known as Tulum is famous for its spiritual douchebaggery and rapid westernization. It is the antithesis to the quaint pueblo of Puerto Morelos where we live. The situation in Tulum is a bit of a tragedy, and as I mentioned in the last episode, I was warned about this trend by the spirit of the town when I visited the beach city in 2020. Gross as this is, the popularity of Tulum still speaks to the rising demand for spiritual experiences, though it also demonstrates the problem: icky, predatory capitalism subverting the subtleties of genuine spiritual growth with more exciting and marketable experiences. I was quite fond of Tulum and had been seriously considering the area prior to my visit in 2020. The ancient ruins at Tulum were where I had had my first supernatural experience, after all. But it seems the Spirit did us quite a favor by guiding our intentions elsewhere, both in terms of the fake spirituality culture in Tulum and the drier, hotter temperatures and the irredeemability of the soil. The area where we bought our land is the only area that our real estate agent recommended to us based on our collection of requirements. The high jungle is ideal for our growing needs. The eco-friendly community will appreciate our permaculture approach, and being out about our magical practice is very tolerated as well. Most people around here are open-minded, and many are seeking or undergoing their own spiritual transformation. There is an appetite and interest for magical and regenerative thinking that is collectively brewing here. This is all set up for a story that extends our aspirations past simply being here to actually building a life, a homestead, and a business that will support us and serve needs within our community as well. Any land within 50 kilometers of the coast in Mexico can't be purchased by foreigners directly, and it typically requires a land trust called a fideicomiso. What we didn't know when we began the process of purchasing our land and setting up our fideicomiso, and apparently neither did anyone else that we worked with, lawyers, real estate agents, bankers, and so on, is that a fideicomiso can only be used for lots that are less than 2,000 square meters. Most foreigners just want to buy a condo on the beach, and the rules are designed to protect the locals from predatory foreign investment. Ours is much bigger than 2,000 square meters, though, so we were forced to set up a Mexican corporation to buy our land as a workaround. You see, Mexican companies are legal entities in Mexico and able to buy property just like any Mexican citizen. And foreigners are allowed to own 100% of Mexican corporations. So Sarah owns 50% of our stock and I own the other 50%. We'd always figured that one day we'd start some business locally, but it's a violation of our temporary residency visas to receive any kind of a salary until we become permanent residents in 2 years. So this definitely wasn't a priority at the time. But suddenly we were being asked to describe the business that we were creating in order to purchase our land. What kind of business it was, what it was going to buy and sell, how many employees we would hire, and so on. And while awkward, this was actually quite useful because at this point, we'd really only imagined being in our sanctuary in paradise, not so much what we would be doing there. Setting up the corporation triggered a whole new phase of our adventure here, and not unlike the beginning of the first phase, it was chaotic, overwhelming, creative, and inspiring. And that process was revealing in terms of the future, as our gut instincts tend to be exposed much more clearly in the swirl of all the overwhelming potential. And those early gut reactions, instincts, and imaginings are the ones that eventually reappear in some faintly recognizable form in the futures that we actually manifest. Looking ahead, we now know our purpose here, personally, professionally, and spiritually. We obviously don't know everything, but we do have a much better map of the territory ahead. We now have some idea what a 5-year or a 10-year plan might look like, and of course, no one knows how accurate that really is, but either way, we have our mission. We know the plan, and we can visualize what success looks like. Finally. With this goal clearly in mind, I'm finally ready to reveal what comes next. Phase 2 of our grand adventure, the building of a spiritual sanctuary in the jungle. From permaculture to raising animals, of course, biodiversity is always on our minds, but beyond that, there's altars to build, spirit houses to erect, bungalows to construct, plant allies to source and cultivate, materials to produce, workshops to teach, and people to heal. Stay tuned for the full story in just a moment. Welcome to episode 15 of the Postmugglism podcast. I'm your host, Nate. Thanks for tuning in. This episode is sort of an extension of the last episode, where I shared our story of how we answered the call of place and left our old lives to stop dreaming and start building the better future that we know is possible. In this episode, I'm going to cast our sights a little further down the road to the next phase of our immediate journey and our dreams of the future. But first, before I get too far into telling this story, please do me a favor right now and just take a second to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't done so already. That way, you'll always get notified whenever new episodes of the show are published. Now, if you remember, as I just mentioned, we had to create a Mexican company, a corporation, to purchase our property in the jungle. And this meant that we were suddenly being asked a lot of questions about our business that we really didn't know how to answer yet. As a result, we were forced to consider how we would, one day, pay for our lives here. It's trickier than you'd expect, because there are limitations to how and when we can earn, and there are also moral and ethical concerns about competing with locals and so forth. By this time, I'd already decided to take the Four Wind Institute's energy healing training program, and I had an inkling of what that might mean, but no real business plan to speak of. And the class hadn't even started yet, so really, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. Even so, we were riding high on our enthusiasm for shamanism, and this opportunity to live and work close to the land, and in relationship to spirit. It was, after all, an opportunity to do magic for a living, to spend 100% of our time dedicated to the weird things that we love. Unwilling to go back to the toxic life that we left, we were facing starting completely over, but for something of our own creation, ours and the spirits who led us here. But nothing's free, right? That's what we asked the universe for. A beautiful home and a life filled with gardening, creativity, and spirituality, in a place that's wild, secluded, and resilient to the rapidly changing world around us. And then there's what the universe needs us to do, to earn the right to live this dream life. Spiritual engagement is reciprocal. You ask, they give, and you owe something in exchange. In our case, we were accepting various responsibilities such as replacing and improving the biodiversity and habitat on our land, particularly when we have disturbed it in the creation of our home. Creating a positive cash flow for ourselves so that we can survive, but also for the local economy. Producing the necessary resources to do all of this regeneratively without taxing the land. And in general, to contribute positively to the field. With these requirements in mind, and brainstorming, divining, and meditating on our future business, it didn't take long for us to see the opportunity, in general terms at least. And since then, more and more of a developing plan has fallen into place. What fun would it be to cultivate a tropical homestead hidden in the jungle, if no one ever saw it? But then again, who wants a stream of people coming through their quiet sanctuary, right? To share our sanctuary only sometimes, not all the time, while spending all of our time growing, homesteading, and doing magic. This describes an increasingly specific goal. So before long, we had a pretty detailed vision of the future. The dream is to take full advantage of our relationship with place, while avoiding any extractive practices that drain the soil of nutrients, of the future potential for life, to satisfy our immediate financial needs. A regenerative business is one that enriches the more than human collective, reinvesting into the community as its revenues grow. Contrary to what you might expect, growing food or medicinal plants or raising animals to sell, to make money, is a challenging thing to do if you're trying to accomplish it regeneratively, especially when it's just on a few acres of heavily forested jungle. It takes a lot of land to grow and to raise animals regeneratively at scale, i.e. to have enough to sell. More than we have, but not so much to meet the demands of a small family. Plus, land represents much more than soil and space for crops and animals. Place refers to more than just space. It's also a part of identity. Places have energy that is unique, and people flock to certain places simply because of the way that it makes them feel. Places have personality, and that is a value in itself. Rather than extracting nutrients from the soil in quantities large enough to live off of profitably, tapping into this form of renewable value by offering its personality to be experienced by small groups of respectful visitors is a far more regenerative way to generate a financial return on our land investment. But what can we offer to make that experience unique and appealing enough to warrant people paying for the experience of visiting our land without risking the sanctity of our sanctuary in the process? Well, can you imagine a better environment to release stress and trauma than a beautiful bit of jungle in the Caribbean surrounded by gardens, wildlife, cenotes, with ceremonial fires, hammocks, walking paths, and altars for meditation, prayer, and magic? Not to mention having a trained healer, bungalows for sleeping in, and an organic apothecary and astromagical shop on hand. It's both a dream combination for us, and, we have reason to think, something very much in demand, or at least will be, and well suited to the eco-friendly tourist center where we live. And this approach to earning money tactfully avoids competition with the locals, as there's really nothing like that here, and it would draw more money from tourists into the economy instead of out of it. So it checks all the boxes. So dream with me a little as we take a tour through the sanctuary that we're building in the jungle, while I provide updates on our progress on various fronts: construction, strategy, products and services, and we look forward to the future a little further down the road. It took us 1.5 years to complete the purchase of our lot in the jungle because of a number of delays, including an 8-month wait to get our company tax ID, essential for all of the paperwork that's required. Thankfully, our seller was very patient. But while we waited on the tax ID, we've been working on the architectural designs, construction plans, surveys, and the other details that are required for the permit to build our long-awaited future house. As of now, the plans are in place and have even been submitted to the local authorities. So we'll get our approval soon, pay whatever fees are required, and then get started on construction. Thinking back to the beginning of the design phase, now almost 1 year ago, it's been an exciting and confidence-building process, fortunately. We did about half of this process before with another local builder and didn't love the experience, so we chalked that up to a learning curve, and we asked our real estate agent for an introduction to another builder. Fortunately, the next contact that she gave us was for an eco-builder, and this interested us greatly. Unlike our previous builder, this guy, Marco, was eager to work in the jungle. We flew him and his architect, Barbara, out from Mexico City to visit our property, to talk to the municipality, and to research all the various requirements that our little project entails. We liked Marco right away. He's enthusiastic about our project and very knowledgeable. And Barbara, likewise, is likable, competent, and very creative. Between the two of them, they researched everything that we needed to know about building in our location in only a few days, from paperwork to surveys to the specialists that we need to hire along the way. They were exceptionally professional and efficient, and increased our level of confidence tremendously. It also afforded us the opportunity to dream about something that was becoming increasingly tangible, soon to be real: compared to the months and now years of dreaming futures too far away to clearly visualize. The design team did an amazing job and created something really unique and special. Our house forms a circle, with a courtyard at the center, and structures on opposing hemispheres, like two semicircles facing each other. On one side is our home, and the other our business, the Sacred Serpent. The house is roomy but simple, with an emphasis on storage and kitchen space, and otherwise is a simple 2-2 setup, except that it's all rounded on the exterior into a circle. On the business end, there are two rooms, the workshop and the spirit room, for healing sessions. The workshop is sizable, enough for 10 to 20 people, with workspace and a slop sink and various other features. It's surrounded by big screen windows looking out into the yard and allowing in the breeze. The spirit room is simple, designed to be able to shut out the world, but has windows for light and a pretty view. The courtyard is arguably the house's best feature. It's round, enclosed by a dog fence where there are no structures, and it's at least 30 feet in diameter. Several trees fill the center, and between them there are massive exposed roots and the beginning of a little path that I've been walking on my visits over the last year and a half. The canopy is thick and high and will partially cover the house. One of these center trees is old, big, and half its trunk leans out across the courtyard at an angle before turning abruptly upwards. We'll clean and gravel the area under these trees and swap vines and brush for ornamental shade plants and such, but it will still feel very much like the jungle inside our home, the house and the business attached to a ring enclosing this magical scene. This ring is a concrete and stone walkway that connects our various rooms and is covered by the roof so that it's usable in the rain. Just beyond its border is the gravel of the courtyard, down a step or two below. There are two bathrooms indoors and a compostable toilet just outside of the spirit room for clients and visitors. On the outside of the ring, adjacent to the kitchen, there's a screened patio we call the portico, which doubles as a dining room and creative space for writing or painting and so on, which overlooks the backyards and the gardens. This is where future content for this podcast and my other projects will be dreamed up and created. In the outside yard, it's a circle, so there is no backyard per se, just the quadrant that the portico looks out onto, where something like a backyard will go with big graveled spaces under the canopy of old trees. This is where daily life will take place. Ornamental gardens will surround each tree, and a modest above-ground soaking pool will sit in a little spot of sun somewhere surrounded by plumerias. The dogs will have a wide fenced run for playing fetch outdoors, and I'll cook over a wood fire in a simple but spacious outdoor kitchen. Sarah will lounge in one of the many hammocks or swings, reading or planning projects, or perhaps having a soak in the pool. Around the outer edge of our yard, before reaching a wall of impenetrable jungle greenery, the edge of the yard is cultivated with pollinators, vines, herbs, and useful shrubs, our various medicinal, functional, and beautiful plant allies. Into the thick of the jungle, a small walking path leads from the yard and disappears into the forest invitingly. Following this trail leads to an entirely different world. Each step moves you deeper into an increasingly wild scene with thick vines draped between old trees and thickets formed over their fallen compatriots, the sounds of fast feet scuttling away across dry leaves as lizards and the adorable big-bootied local rodents, the agouti, are startled by our presence. The path winds in exaggerated, unnecessary dips and turns to drag out the experience of walking its length. This meandering design creates little nooks and pockets, the edges of which will be cultivated in permaculture style. Where fallen trees open up the potential for respectful diversification, trees, shrubs, and vines will be cultivated into self-sufficient growing communities. Areas where light naturally peeks through will be cleared of small saplings to open up the canopy and select more expansive zones for more robust permaculture gardens. These gardens will host spacious outdoor altars, nestled in amongst the plants and trees, a pollinator garden dedicated to Venus, a night garden for the moon, and so on. Towards the center of the property, a wide diameter area will house a fire circle and a crossroads where various paths around the property are joined. At this crossroads will be a large altar to Hecate filled with offerings, bones of animals from the property, and magical workings in progress. Another path leads away to our sacred tree and the preserved, virgin, untouched wild area where the Alush, or spirit house, sits at the base of a magnificent tree near the eastern border of our property. The very first time that we stepped foot on our property, after the survey team cut a path 150 meters from the nearest road, our first act was to make an offering in this magical spot at the foot of this tree, and we've been leaving our offerings there ever since. At the crossroads, another path also connects, leading to a small cul-de-sac surrounded by a few bungalows where we host our visitors. And yet another path leads the long way, circuitously back towards the house in the northwest corner, by the way of the western border and our orchard. Adjacent to the house and opposite the portico, an area will be opened up to the midday and afternoon sun where our young orchard will grow, bit by bit each year, a gradual journey to adulthood and finally fruit production. Around the border of the property, we'll cut a wide swath, excluding any big trees, of course, roughly 4 meters wide around the 400-meter perimeter as a fire break, and to clearly illustrate our property line because one day, someone's going to build roads there. Along the edge of this future road, 400 meters of soil will be exposed to direct sunlight for over half the day. Rotating stretches of permaculture hedgerows will produce either quick-yield fruits like papayas and bananas, or chop-and-drop crops to hold on to nutrients, designing a simple fallow process into our productive system while maintaining as much canopy as possible on our property. Close to the house, but not too close, there will be a bustling chicken coop and a little barn for 2 goats and their kids. Eggs, milk, cheese, etc. will come from our animals, though meat will still come from elsewhere. The animals will be let out to scratch, peck, forage, and to fertilize our various gardens under supervision. They'll be fed primarily produce from our gardens, and they'll generate more or less just enough eggs and dairy to supply our small family's demands. Their most important contribution, though, their greatest gift to us, is their poop. Their shit is the key to everything. Shit, especially chicken shit, when blended with produce and garden scraps and the endless supply of dry brown leaves around, is fast composting nitro boost. The jungle is a literal compost machine when provided with enough of what's called green compost, which includes materials like kitchen and garden scraps and the feces of herbivorous animals. Animals like chickens and goats, for example, are a sustainable source of nitrogen-rich fertilizer, particularly when they're fed organic materials within your land and its nutrient cycle. Their shit is the key to everything. Chickens and goats shit where they stand, so their bedding and dry material in their pens collects their droppings, which can be gathered and deposited into a compost pile with plant material, coffee grounds, eggshells, etc., and of course, lots of brown, dry compost, which is primarily carbon, in a 30% green and 70% brown ratio. A little sun, a tarp, and some elbow grease to turn the pile occasionally, and you have a super efficient, fast composting system. And the only limit on compost production is how much green can be produced, because again, there's no shortage of fallen sticks and leaves around. What we don't mulch or compost of that brown stuff we'll gather from the domesticated areas that the humans occupy and burn, the ash of which will be fed to the trees and added to compost piles. Our mission is to turn the 6 inches of good topsoil that we have into 12 or more through a perpetual process of soil improvement and nutrient replacement. All life comes from the soil in one way or the other. Enriching the soil leads fairly directly to increased biodiversity and the greater flourishing of the entire community of beings at large. Beyond the dream home that we're building, the sanctuary I keep mentioning is, of course, the gardens, walking paths, orchard, and the rest, because those places will be habitat and food for all sorts of creatures, in addition to what value that they have for us. This is regenerative permaculture at work, everything contributing in self-interest in ways that benefit the whole. But it's also a spiritual sanctuary, both a sanctuary for spirit and also for those people who are seeking a spiritual connection. I've witnessed, as a shamanic energy healer, that it can be difficult to fully let go of the past, experience transformation, and integrate your experiences in your typical environment with regular life happening all around you. Instead, if you can step out of your normal setting for the duration of an initiatory or restorative or healing experience, then you can plant seeds which will continue to grow in you unconsciously after you return to normal life. Stepping away allows the experience to set in more fully than when you have other competing distractions. Our goal is to live as much of our lives as possible in this state, and to move ourselves into relationship with our land and its inhabitants. Not everyone has this environment at their disposal, or the time or convenience to live this way, but thanks to Spirit, We do. And we can provide a taste, a temporary reprieve, and perhaps inspiration for people who need a break, need to heal, are going through a personal or spiritual transformation, and so on. We can hold space and hold ceremony. We can host, entertain, educate, and connect our visitors with the greater spiritual, psychedelic, and tourist-serving community in our area. Even our immediate community could benefit, since many of our neighbors have Airbnbs, extra rooms, and camping spots as side businesses. Many ideas come to mind. Full moon ceremonies for manifestation, new moon fire ceremonies for releasing and purging, daytime workshops, workshops over a weekend, even full-on retreats. Spiritual tourism is a thing here, and there's no reason not to take the opportunity to work a little real magic on these wannabe seekers, to open their minds and their hearts a little. Everyone needs sanctuary, particularly in these anxiety-inducing times. It's why we moved here, honestly. So it will be an honor to provide that peace and tranquility and the access to nature to others while they're on their personal journeys. And as an energy healer, there are many ways that I can support these transformative processes, providing energetic cleansings, energetically removing trauma, divining for clarity, and so on. In my head, there's a Venn diagram of 3 interlocking circles. The first containing my work with spirits of place, the second containing the shamanic practice, healing, etc., and the third containing permaculture, the natural setting, and all the spiritual attractions, for the lack of a better word, that this area has to offer. And right in the middle is that sweet spot where we offer all 3 of those things together as an opportunity for spiritual growth and healing in a magical, tropical setting. To grow food on our land, to feed ourselves and our animals, isn't just resilience. It's living in relationship with the land and our more than human neighbors. To share that bounty with guests and visitors, demonstrating the quality and wellness of organically grown food prepared with love, creates a negligible to net zero nutrient loss that our composting efforts will more than compensate. To create gardens housing altars in the woods is a beautiful tribute, to be sure, but how much better is the devotional gesture if we can fill those spaces with the prayers of others? Teaching our guests how to engage respectfully with nature through permaculture and homesteading, and with spirit through despacho ceremonies, tending altars and spirit houses, and facilitating psychedelic experiences with local shamans offering ayahuasca, sacred mushrooms, peyote, and so on. What an incredible opportunity, both for ourselves and our future guests. I never really had the opportunity to experience anything like this in the earlier days of my magical career, and I'm sure that it would have meant a lot to me, and probably helped me get to where I am now a lot faster and with a lot less pain and frustration. To be able to offer this affordably, 30 minutes from the Cancun International Airport, and only a few hours flight from anywhere in the US, and just a few more to anywhere in Canada, is a very exciting prospect. And I can see the sense of it from a business perspective as well. Sanctuary is something that I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about, defining for myself, and what I've come to is that it's both place and setting, physically, emotionally, and spiritually speaking. Sanctuary is a place that holds space rather than occupying it. It makes you open up, find yourself, and flourish because all the right conditions have been provided. The conditions for our success along the way have been made and met by spirit, and it has been, for the most part, dizzying, uncanny, and a bit disorienting. It feels like life is moving slowly most of the time, but then we can look back and see so much territory in the rear view. And looking forward usually causes the knees to buckle under the uncertainty and magnitude of the future of this project that we've signed up for. I have no doubt that the story that I've told you today will not be precisely what happens. Much of what's happened so far has been unpredictable, so I just embrace my false assumptions while I can and roll with the punches when they come. Whatever it will be, this adventure is not dull. It does not disappoint, and it is slowly tempering us towards greater spiritual strength and durability. We're being forged into instruments of spirit, and we're, bit by bit, coming to understand what that means, how it will work in the future, and where we have to go from here. Whether the bungalows get built or we leverage the ones our neighbors are building, the details can change, but the story remains the same. It would be a lie to suggest that I know exactly how any of this is going to end up, and all I have to go on myself, or to offer in validation, is the road that we've traveled so far and the uncanny successes that we've experienced along the way. This dream is a big vision. It's a big, scary goal that's certainly bigger than the two of us and further away than we can predict with any accuracy. Still, Step by step, we keep moving forward and making progress. It took us 18 months to shut down our old lives back in Dallas and move to Mexico. But we made that dream come true. Then it took a year and a half to buy our land, but we finally have the title in our name. It took about a year to successfully set up our Mexican company, but that hurdle has finally been crossed as well. There are still many, many boxes to check and obstacles to overcome, but we are making progress. And since we finally know what it is, more or less exactly, that we're building, it's so much easier to figure out just what the hell we're supposed to do next. Right now, that's waiting patiently for permits to get approved, and then working feverishly to set up camp for the construction team, price materials, and burn the down brush from my various cleaning efforts to date. Our neighbor is building a glamping business, as he calls it. It's a glamp ground, if you will. We're helping, hoping for his success, and watching so that we can learn everything that we can so that we're better equipped when it's our time to create our bungalows or whatever it is that we do. We're gathering seeds on our walks throughout lovely Puerto Morelos, the coastal town where we live now, starting seedlings and learning about the local flora in every way that we can. So much expertise in growing, foraging, and putting the local flora to work is squirreled away in the minds of locals, and it takes time to gain access to those resources, time in the community. There is certainly work to be done, lots of it. But instead of heading towards a vague concept of sanctuary and paradise, we have a clear picture that we can manifest daily through our mundane efforts, and always in the background, magically as well. The magic of sanctuary making has been a learning experience in its own right, informative enough to fill its own show, but for the sake of including a taste here, it's worth exploring some of the magic that we've worked already and the general shape of the magic that we're working right now. Thinking back to the sort of rituals that we were doing in 2020 as this train started to leave the station versus where it is now pulling up in what is essentially the destination of that original journey, i.e. the construction of our home in the Mexican Caribbean. It's come a long, long way. Sarah and I were discussing earlier today how we used to cast sigils for almost everything, in shoals of related statements of intent designed to work like cluster bombs of probability, blanketing our goals thoroughly with magical ordnance. These days, astrological timing is the fulcrum that we most often leverage for magical efficacy, making talismans like Oprah gives out cars. Everyone gets one. For every need there is the perfect time, though often enough, it's the best available time that ends up being the one that has to be good enough. We keep a comprehensive devotional practice and the odd hours of talisman makers to support our constant spirit-bothering activities. There are, of course, all those elections that we're working just to create talismans for our catalog and collection, but just as often, we put them to work for our own projects to overcome our challenges and so on. Some of the most important workings in the last year have been lunar mansion elections, mostly because of my other project, the Lunar Mansion Guide that I produce monthly, and you can find that on YouTube and on my website, www.postmugglism.com. In particular, we have a third Lunar Mansion talisman for attracting prosperity, a 26th Lunar Mansion talisman for love and strengthening our relationship, 28th Lunar Mansion talismans and oil for abundance, and an 18th Lunar Mansion oil for protection, which is particularly strong. I like the Lunar Mansion system, obviously, for a variety of reasons, but I think one of its best features is its comprehensive and permutative array of uses, giving us access to so many different talismanic opportunities through the moon's polymorphous nature. The magic of the spheres, celestial magic, or as I call it, sky magic, is our go-to system for tactical enchantments, the kind that influences the civilized world and all its human dramas, the purview of the gods. In contrast, the magic of the earth, of Mother Nature, of Pachamama, is its antithesis. Chthonic earthly magic, nature worship, or dirt sorcery as I call it, gives us access to the practical enchantment of the natural world, growing, nourishing, healing, evolving, and weaving together lifeways to create harmonious balance. This is greatly underappreciated magic within the framework of Western esotericism, but it is gaining attention with the rise of neo-shamanism. It requires a more intuitive skill set, less memorizing incantations and more learning to be still, to listen, and to distill understanding from metaphor. Ceremony isn't always magical ritual. It's often maintenance, keeping up good relations with good neighbors, and so on. These relationships are forged through repetition and appeasement. They have terms and conditions, ceremonial obligations, and important traditions. And these relationships pave the way for spiritual support in the form of protection, good fortune, unexpected boons, and other benefits. There's protection magic, from marking the bounds of the property and separately the house, and there's maintaining prayers and offerings for the safety of our workers and the success of our project. And there is the aspirational, long-term magic of bringing as many aspects of our mundane and magical lives as possible into relationship with our land and its community of beings. The tinctures, oils, salves, and such in our apothecary catalog will all one day be grown from the seeds of last year's harvest, cared for in passing by the hands of spiritual seekers, students, and visiting friends and family. Our success will grow out of the love that we and our guests show the land. Love and a whole lot of chicken shit. Thanks for joining me for episode 15 of the Postmugglism podcast, Sanctuary in Paradise. I hope our story has been entertaining and inspires hope and stokes your desire to dream the better future that we all know is possible. We're doing our very best to live the future that we want to see in the world, and I hope that in sharing our passion for this project, you're given more confidence to pursue your dreams, whatever they are. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, wherever you're listening, so that you don't miss out when I publish new episodes. I'm currently producing at least a show every 2 weeks, with some bonus episodes when I've got a lot to say on a particular subject. And if you want to see everything that I'm creating, from articles and videos to other episodes like this, subscribe to my email newsletter at my website, www.postmugglism.com. If you look in the sidebar on the home page and in most other places, you'll see a little place to sign up for the email list. Do that so that you get all my content and so you can take advantage of occasional specials, discounts, and so on my services as a shamanic energy healer, tarot reader, and magical consultant of sorts. In the next episode, I'm taking a sharp turn away from sanctuary and spirit to examine the rise of transhumanism and the religion of science, poking holes in the wisdom of convention and exposing the imperialism of empiricism. And of course, I'll look at ways of both working towards alternatives to materialist science and also coexisting with it, staying with the trouble for practical considerations. Thanks again for tuning in today, sharing your time with me, and allowing me to share my stories with you. If you have any thoughts, feedback, questions, etc. for me after listening to this podcast, please reach out to me as Postmugglism on social media or by email at postmugglism@gmail.com. It's been a lot of fun. I hope to see you for the next episode. Until then, take care.